Now, we've looked at the most high percentage escapes from side position. Nothing will ever beat the elbow escape and knee escape in that regard. Nonetheless, it's very important we have some alternative methods of getting out, because you just never know how your opponent is going to hold you, how they're going to manipulate you, where their body weight is, etc., etc. So it's nice to have some alternative methods. We may not use them as often as we do elbow and knee escapes, but they have a purpose and they have a role to play. It's important that you know them. The first one we're going to look at is the high leg escape, where I use a movement of my head inside my opponent's crossface, and then use my legs coming up high over my opponent's body to trap his head and put him in what looks like an arm lock attack, but in all honesty, in most cases, more realistically, you'll put him back in guard rather than successfully arm block him. So let's have a look at it. Sean Williams has gone across my side, and he is employing the most commonly seen form of grip in side pins, the top head and arm grip, which controls my arm, my head. He has a crossface, and his hands are locked in good position, just like so. One way we can counter this is to take our hand and put it through and create our own crossface pressure from bottom. As he goes to apply his crossface from top, we can maneuver and manipulate his head position from bottom. This hand position, with our hand here on our training partner's shoulder, does come at a slight risk of exposure to wrist locks, but the risk is manageable. Okay, it's a very strong and sound defensive position. Once we get in here, our primary thing is to move our opponent's head, and critically to get my head inside his crossface. As long as Sean's crossface makes contact with my jawline, when he goes to put pressure on me, I feel all of that. As he drives forward, you can hear my voice changing. As Sean Williams goes to apply more and more pressure, you'll hear the pressure of the crossface taking its effect. Okay? So what should we be looking to do from bottom position here? What we want to do is to move our opponent's head sufficiently that I can get my own head inside his crossface. How are we going to do that? You're not going to do it just by pushing with your arms. You're going to do it by creating a wave effect that begins at the legs. So, from here, I start everything with a sudden push and drive with my legs. That begins a movement of my training partner's head. Then, building off the momentum created by the legs, my arm flares. And as a result, we can pop our head inside our training partner's crossface. The moment my opponent's crossface is released, suddenly my legs and hips can move so much easier. And it becomes very easy for me to throw my legs right up and catch my training partner's head and shoulders. And from here, we can take our training partner straight down to the mat and into position where we can get strong counterattacks. Now, in all honesty, this Jujigatami that we've just entered into isn't the strongest Jujigatami in the world. And it's quite likely your opponent will be able to pull out of this position and escape either from here or even when they're on their two knees. Especially if you've hit the move several times and they're starting to anticipate it. That's fine, because as he pulls away, he'll create space for you to put him back in guard. So even though the arm lock didn't work, you still got out of side, so you're still doing well. Once again, our opponent is in here and has a good pin across our side. We're going to start off by taking our hand and passing it through and creating our own crossface effect, just in like so. Now, we need to get inside our training partner's crossface. So we start with a momentum generated by the legs and then overtaken by the arms, which enables us to slip our head and bring our legs into a potentially winning position. And from here, we go in and we get the attack. Now, I'm just going to show you what is statistically the most likely scenario when you get to employ this move. Again, your opponent starts to see what it is and starts to anticipate it. Most of the time, your opponent will pull his arm free. You'll see the legs coming over the head, and they'll go to pull out. So, we have a more experienced opponent on top of us now. We go to hit the move, we create a drive with the legs, we continue to drive, and we come through, and he goes to pull away. That's fine. We follow his body, and now we line up center line to center line. Once our center lines are in place, we now take our foot back through, and we find ourselves back in a situation where we can either go back to a conventional guard or go into some kind of attack from bottom position. Once again, perhaps a more realistic scenario. We lock up. Our training partner's an experienced opponent, presumably he is. He got across our side, he passed our guard, so we must have some skills. From here, we take our legs and we generate a considerable amount of momentum, stride, and we throw. And from here, he successfully pulls his arm free. We bring our legs back around the corner, and we're now in a good position to work from bottom position. So even when the arm lock fails, you still get a great result. You still successfully put your opponent back in guard, which is always our primary goal whenever we're in bad position in the sport of jiu-jitsu. Now, let's look at the details that will make the high leg escape work in a tough competitive environment. We saw that when someone goes to pin us cross-side, that if we can get a frame inside our training partner's shoulder, then from here we have a good chance of initiating a movement with our legs, continuing it with our arms, and slipping our head inside. I cannot emphasize strongly enough the need on your part to get your head inside their cross space. Very often I'll see students attempt the high leg escape and fail for this very obvious reason. They bridge their opponent and then they come back down without first getting their head inside the cross space. This means your neck is still under control of your opponent. So when you try to throw your legs high, you end up with these rather forlorn-looking situations where you're trying to catch your opponent's head with your leg, and it's a disaster. Remember, what makes this move work is your ability to penetrate with the right knee. Only when my right knee goes underneath my training partner's chest will the move work. And the only way to get your knee into this position is to get past that crossface. Again, I don't care how strong your bridge is. I don't care how strong you are at moving your opponent's head. If you come back down to the mat with your head still inside his crossface, with his shoulder still on your ear, no amount of flexibility will enable you to catch your opponent here. The whole thing is that it looks as though it's my left leg, the high leg, doing the work. In fact, it's the inside leg, the knee penetrating underneath my opponent. That's the working leg. This leg monitors distance in a pull. It prevents my opponent from getting away. But in any escape, the more important movement is pushing to create space away, and that's done by my inside leg. The only way I can get my inside leg between myself and my opponent is to get my head inside and slip the crossface. It's that which enables me to hold my opponent's chest up. Now, even when Shawn Williams tries to bring his chest back down, there's a frame in place. And as a result, my legs become very light and they throw easily into this good position. From here, either I finish on the arm lock, or if my opponent should pull away, we put him back in some form of open guard. So, how do we ensure that we get our head inside every time? Well, we know that it's important that we get our hips up off the floor. A trick which I will often employ if we just rotate in this direction is a double thumb post, where I take both of my thumbs, and as I hit that initial movement, I take two thumbs and I go from here to here, and I post inside the bicep, so that when Shawn Williams tries to follow me back down to the mat, it's like you're just slipping out from a tight shirt. Then from here, everything goes up, we catch, we find ourselves in the perfect position to either attack the arm, or if we should lose the arm, to go back into some form of attacking guard. One more time. My opponent's in a good tight pin. From here, we start with a bridge, double thumb post, and then we come back down to the floor and slip inside. Knee goes in. That's the more important leg. This leg here is more or less cosmetic. This is the working leg. It's the passage of my right knee underneath, which enables me to push my opponent off and create sufficient space that from here we can go to work from bottom position. Now, the question you might be asking is, well, what if Shawn Williams is in really tight? How the hell am I going to get my hand into that position that is required for this escape? Well, what I often counsel my students to do is to begin by bridging in what appears to be the wrong direction. Normally, we bridge into our opponents. but I need to get this hand inside. I need my own crossface on him. If Sean Williams' head is up tight, ear to ear with mine, there's no way my hand will fit inside. So what are we going to do? We're going to put a hand on our training partner's shoulder, and we're going to bridge and expand our chest in what appears to be the wrong way. And as a result, my hand goes in quite easily. Once we've established the hand position, no need to wait around now. Now we bridge the other way over the inside shoulder, and we go right into the high leg escape. Once again, Sean Williams is blocking my hand from getting into that crossface position. So from here, we give a bridge and we expand our chest so that there's now space for me to get my hand inside. So I bridged over my outside shoulder to get my hand in place. Once I've established my hand position, we reverse direction. Now we bridge over the inside shoulder. And as a result, we get our opponent back in a position where we can go on the attack from underneath. Let's turn our attention now to a different form of escape from side pinnings, one which I greatly favor. This one does require the ability to get to an underhook on our opponent so that we can turn into them and go to control one of their ankles. If you can get that underhook, this is one of the absolute best escapes out there, an ankle trap escape. From a situation where Sean Williams is pinning me across side, and for whatever reason, I've been able to secure an underhook on my training partner like so. Now, because I have the underhook, I'm able to turn into my training partner. We'll just shift the ankle a little bit shorter. As I move my body out, we're going to put our elbow just inside our training partner's knee, almost like an elbow escape. My hand is going to go from the underhook position, and we're going to go forward and capture our training partner's foot. When we grip, let's make sure we grip close to the ankle. Don't grab around the leg up here by the hamstring. We're looking for the ankle here. And when we pick our training partner's foot up, it feels very, very easy, even when your opponent makes a strong leg. The ankle bears no weight, and it's a very easy thing to get it. Now we take our leg, and we hook over the top, and we lock a triangle. Because I have a triangle now, I can safely take my arm and grip around here at the waist. Now, my second hand cuts in and scores my training partner's leg, just like so. We grip onto the belt and the leg. From this position, it's relatively easy for us to walk our training partner's two knees together into a straight line. And then from here, it's an easy thing to tilt the man over and end up in top position. Let's have a look at some more details here, changing the angle somewhat. From a situation where I have my hand here underneath my training partner's arm in a classic underhook, it's not so difficult for us to start an action of getting a blocking elbow just inside our training partner's knee. I come down and capture my training partner's ankle and elevate it off the mat. As a result, I can move my body to his knee. The further my hips away, the less successful we're going to be here. So let's make sure we pull our hips to his knee. Now we go over the top and we lock up a triangle and figure 4 around our training partner's ankle. When he tries to pull his ankle free, it's not going anywhere. It's locked in place. Now I go across and scoop my training partner's leg. If my opponent was naive and had his hand out on the floor, there's no reason from this position why we can't simply move our body out, pull our elbow up, and start to threaten his back. So the onus is on our opponent to keep good tight rhythm. From here, I walk his two knees into a straight line. Then from here, I move my body in this direction and tilt him over towards the mat. A key element in this movement is the idea of bringing my training partner's two knees into a straight line. I'll show you from a different angle so you can observe this. Here, I've managed to get my underhook in place. I need to get inside my training partner's crossface. We do that by bridging and getting inside the crossface. I capture my training partner's ankle. I shift my body around the corner towards the ankle. I never want to reach for the ankle with my foot. Rather, I use my right foot on the floor to pull my body to his ankle. And it's that which makes for an easy catch. Once we lock up the triangle around our training partner's ankle, that ankle's not going anywhere, it's stuck. Now we come up to the waist, and we form a good connection to our opponent. Now, just shifting in this direction here, Sean. Put your leg up one. You can currently see that Sean Williams' two knees are a long distance apart, so he has a good base of support. Okay, he feels robust and strong in this position. So our whole thing is to draw his two knees together. Now, realistically, you won't be able to pull with your arm, like a strong leg, Sean. I cannot pull his knee to me. So what I have to do is push his inside knee towards his outside knee. I can't pull the outside knee inwards, but I can easily push the inside knee outwards. And as a result, we can now tilt and take our training partner over. Ultimately, what we want to do is create a situation where our opponent's width or base of support is narrowed. Here, he feels incredibly robust and strong. Knees together. But once the knees come together, now we can easily start tilting people around the mat. So our goal from the bottom position is to bring those two knees together. It starts with an underhook. Once we get that underhook in place, we move and catch. Now, I lock up, and look how my body brings his knees together by pushing my hips. That's what draws the knees together. Don't think you're going to be strong enough to pull two knees. You're not. Your arm is not as strong as both his legs and hips. So what we do is we use our hips to beat his hips. Look how everything goes forward and brings his two knees into a straight line. If he tries to sprawl from here, he won't be able to do it. Sprawling against your leg strength. And now all we do is just walk around the corner and tilt our training partner over, so we end up with a complete reversal. The beauty of this method of escape is that not only do you get out of a bad pin, but you end up with your own pin. It's a complete form of reversal from bottom position. Let's have a look at it again from a slightly different angle. We have an opponent across our side, and however it happens, we are able to get our hand in here as an underhook. I've got to get inside his crossface. As he goes to apply crossface pressure, look how we bridge, and we get the head inside. Now my elbow comes in, we seize our training partner with the ankle, and lock. We get a hold of our training partner's hips, we get a hold of the far leg, and we walk his two knees together. Once his base of support is sufficiently narrow, there's no reason now why we can't start tilting him over. If my opponent reacts to the tilt by putting his right hand on the floor, like so, there's no reason now why we can't use our legs in a pendulum motion to come up and go behind our opponent on the attack. In an emergency, you're also welcome to put your opponent back in guard in the same situation. So, we come in, we beat the crossface, we prop our elbow inside his knee, we capture our training partner's ankle, and his hand goes to the floor. Can't take him over. Okay? Look out from here, we can just pull our elbow back and come up. Now, as he tries to turn and face it, you can always create a little distance and put your opponent back in a guard position, and there are many forms of attack. A key element to this move is the idea of chasing your opponent's ankle. When I first come in, I want to make sure my whole body goes after his ankle. Don't just try to throw your foot. You want to bring this foot towards his ankle and use that to pull your body to the heel. So you go in very easily. Now we come in and we get the legs. We come in here, we get the legs, bring everything together, and we look to the rolls of it. If for whatever reason, my opponent is able to get his hand down to the mat, then from here, so many ways and think of alternatives for us to go. We could, for example, come up into the single leg series that we saw earlier in the video. Let's focus now on an important detail of this ankle trap, the idea of chasing our opponent's heel and ankle. It's very important, once we get the underhook in place, that once we go in here and find our training partner's ankle, I never want to reach from the ankle. I never want to try and reach from a distance and hook. Rather, I place my inside leg closed, and I use that to pull my body to the heel so that I can lock over with my whole hamstring muscle. This way you get a good bite on your opponent's ankle. When he goes to pull the ankle free, it's very, very difficult. Now we go in and catch. We bring two knees together. If for whatever reason, our opponent's able to get the hand to the floor, there's no reason from here why we can't come up into single leg reversals that we saw earlier in the video series. It's a fantastic way to get out. Now, another critical detail that makes this move work is my knee position when I form the ankle trap. Many people make the mistake of making their knees point upwards when they trap the ankle. That will create a weak connection to your opponent's ankle. It's very important when we lock up, my knees face downwards. This forms a very, very tight connection. It's almost impossible for your opponent to pull the ankle free. And from here, the hand connection enables us to put them over. So, demonstrating solo, when we go after the ankle, it's important we use our foot to draw our body to the ankle. Okay? Never just reach from wherever you are. Go to the ankle and make an effective connection. Point your two knees down at the floor. Don't have your knees pointing up at the ceiling. That's a weak connection your opponent can easily stop. Point downwards. Then from here, when it's time to actually take him over, bring your body underneath him and turn him over. Don't just try to force him over from wherever you are with your hands. It's the hips that ultimately take the mat over. So once again, we get a hold of our training partner's ankle and lock the figure of four. Notice how my two knees point downwards. So even with no hands, when Shawn Williams tries to yank his leg out, it's not going anywhere. It's stuck. Now, we get a hold of our training partner. Look how I push everything along the mat and bring his two knees in together. Because his knees are right next to each other, there's very little base of support. And as a result, it's relatively easy for us to walk our hips underneath him and turn him over. I don't make the mistake of just trying to pull his body over, like a strong base shot. It's very, very difficult. Instead, I go underneath his base of support and dump it. If my opponent gets the hand down to the mat, there's no reason why we can't come up into a very strong position to put him down to the floor. In this fashion, you can take a lot of people over using this highly effective escape from side control. The vast majority of escapes that we've seen against side pins all involve turning into your opponent. As a general rule, especially at fundamental level, it's a good idea to favor those kinds of techniques. They generate less back exposure. In general, they tend to be safer than forms of escape when we're turning away from our opponent. But nonetheless, there's always going to be days you come up against an opponent who has a very strong cross face and a good ability to stop you from turning into them. And in these cases, you may need to access escapes that take you in the opposite direction of normal. Now, this can be a little scary when you first start off because it feels like there's a tremendous amount of back exposure going on. So we have to be very careful how we manage the idea of turning away from an opponent so we don't end up exposing our back to our opponent and turning a bad situation into a worse one. Let's start off with the situation itself. We've got Shawn Williams up to our left-hand side, and he's pinning us in the usual fashion. And he's got a strong cross face in here. And I'm having a very, very hard time turning into my opponent. In these situations,
very often it can be a good thing for us to take a small bump and bring our hands through, just like so. I'm going to post my hand on my training partner's shoulders, and we're going to use an action that brings my elbow through from underneath his chest. You cannot hit this move with your elbow underneath the sternum. That will slow down your ability to turn away. So it's important in these situations that small bump brings the elbow through. When your elbow is free, now things start to get interesting. We're going to turn onto our side. The action of turning onto our side does something interesting. When I'm flat on my back, my two legs are symmetrical. When I turn onto my side, this immediately creates a top leg and a bottom leg, and an ability to scissor and start to generate motion. Now, what's going to hold me back in these situations is several things. One is a wedge here as my opponent hooks on tight to my hips. It's going to be hard for me to move. And secondly, there's a threat of back exposure, which might make me nervous to move. Okay? If I get up naively here and start to go like so, I'm giving up a simple seatbelt, the knee penetrates underneath my armpit, and it's very easy for the opponent to get hooks in and score and even strangle you from this situation. So we've got to manage very carefully how we go to get up. In this situation, I'm going to create top leg and bottom leg. The top leg is a big part of the key. I'm going to move my hips away. I do that by reverse shrimping along the mat. Now, I come in and I create a tight connection of my top elbow and my top leg, rather similar to an elbow escape type action. Now from here, we're going to monitor our training partner's hands. And as a result, we're going to be able to take our training partner's hand behind our hamstring. If the elbow is in front of my hips, when I try to turn and move away, the elbows create a problem. So we want to take our opponent's elbow and bring it over the hip. As a result, I can push off the bottom leg and go into a simple act inversion. My head goes between my own legs, and as a result, we shoulder roll and put our opponent back in some variation of guard. Once again, we have an opponent who's done a good job of getting across our side and pinning us. We need to bring our hands through. So we give a small bump that brings my hand inside. If necessary, there may be a second bump that frees my elbow. Once the elbow is free, now I can start to generate effective motion here. A big part of that effective motion is going to be the crisscrossing of my legs. Top leg and bottom leg switch just like so, and then from here we start to monitor our training partner's hand. My intention is to get his elbow from being in front of my hip, where it can stop me from moving, to behind my hip, where it's very difficult. Now from this position, look how we push up. We go into an inverted position. It enables us to go back into the safety of guard. The idea here is that yes, you do turn away from your opponent. And yes, you do expose your back for a very brief period of time. But the back exposure is carefully managed. Because my opponent's hand is under my control, it's very hard for him to lock a seatbelt around my head and arm and take my back. Because my shoulder is on the floor, he can't slide his knee underneath me as a wedge and get hooks in. And because I quickly go from my shoulder into a roll, there's minimal time for my opponent to take my back. Those three elements make it a pretty safe form of escape if it's done in this fashion. So once again, we start off in a fairly conventional bottom pin position. We start with the action of getting the hand in. So he holds on tight. Look how a good bridge gets my hand inside the shoulder. Now a bump gets my elbow out. From here, we start the action of turning onto our side. We create a top leg and a bottom leg. It's the top leg which scissors over. That creates the conditions we need to get a hold of our training partner like so. If my shoulder comes off the mat, his knee goes underneath, that's a problem. So we keep the shoulder down. Now, we push everything behind the hips, and all the power comes off my bottom leg, pushing off the floor. Don't have an extended bottom leg. Cock your leg backwards, so it's close to your buttocks. And as a result, we can quickly come up, turn, and put our opponent back in some variation of guard. Once again, my opponent starts off in a good tight pin. From here, we first generate some kazushi. It gets my hand inside. Once we've freed the hand, a little bump creates secondary kazushi so that our elbow is free. From here, we create top leg and bottom leg. Now, we scissor, we go to control our training partner's hand, push off the mat, we've got our training partner back in guard, and from here, we're ready to play from bottom. This is a very effective way to turn away from a tough opponent on top and get away from cross-face pressure. Let's have a look at the move from another angle and look at the idea of negating a cross-face, because one of the prime motivations for you to use this method of escape is exactly because of this cross-face pressure. A good cross-face is an intimidating thing. Not only does it create discomfort, it strongly limits my ability to turn into my opponent. Most of the more common escapes with side control involve turning in. But when that crossface is very, very strong, it can be very hard for me to do this. That's why it can often be a useful thing to get the hand through. Now, when he goes to apply a crossface, you can hear my voice is not changing at all. Let's contrast this with a situation where we're chest to chest. When Sean Williams goes to apply a crossface, you will hear my voice changing under the pressure of the crossface. By the time it gets well applied, it sounds like I've been breathing helium as my voice changes with the pressure. Okay? Contrast that with a situation where my elbow is through. Now he can put all the pressure he wants, and my voice does not change at all. Okay? This is a very relaxed position. It came at a price, the price of back exposure. But it is a good way to counter a very, very strong crossface, and you will encounter that on occasion. Now, as my opponent goes to hold and control me, look how we create that top leg and bottom leg. Now we come down and control our training partner's hand. Okay, if the hand locks in here, that can be a problem. It's hard for me to get up now. Okay, even worse, the elbow, that too will create problems. So it's important we put everything behind us, just like so. Now we push off that bottom leg, and now it's all about the drive, the roller, the shoulders, and now we're back in business and ready to play from bottom position. This is a very effective way of dealing with strong cross-face pressure. Let's say some words about effective framing when it's time to get out of the various pins that we have to work our way out of in the sport of jiu-jitsu. As a general rule, we greatly favor elbow and forearm frames. That's because when someone is pinning us, generally the distance between the two athletes is very, very short, very close. In examples of guard retention, we generally favor longer frames where you reach with the forehand, like so, and hold people off at an arm's length distance. Understand something. As frames come in towards the body, they get stronger. As a general rule, with regards to the human body, the further my hands get away from my body, the weaker my arms become. The further my hands get from being in front of my body, the weaker they become. So as a general rule, in order to maximize the strength of our frames, we want our frames directly in front of our body and the hands as close to the body as possible. Probably the single most useful form of framing for pin escapes are forearm and elbow frames, where we bend our arms 90 degrees and hold them in close to the body. So the elbows and the hands are close to the body, directly in front of the body, and can bear large amounts of weight. You can do a simple experiment. Time yourself one day, holding your body on extended arms in a push-up position, like so, and see how long you can hold your body in this position. You will find it is dramatically less than a situation where you go on your forearms. And here, you can hold your body for very long periods of time with almost no fatigue in your arms. In fact, your stomach and core will give up long before your arms do. Now, we can use this simple piece of knowledge whenever we go to create frames in bottom position pins. You'll notice if Sean Williams, I just come up into a high pin, knees off the mat, just over the so, legs back. You'll notice if I try to hold Sean Williams in positions like this, my arms quickly fatigue and tire, and it's very, very hard work. It can only hold this kind of thing for very short periods of time. This stands in contrast to me holding with my forearms and elbows. Now, Sean puts all of his weight on top of me. We can hold this position for very long periods of time. And the amount of space that it generates is more than enough for me to bring elbows and knees together to start putting people back in guard or even go into various forms of attack. Okay? So most of the time, we're always working with forearm frames and our elbows close to our body. The more we start working with forehand frames and elbows getting away, the more problematic things become. Okay, this is fine when we're working guard retention. This is a good form of frame for guard retention. But once someone has actually gotten past our guard and is pinning us, now we start to go more into forearm frames and backhand frames. Backhand frames are the ultimate example of getting close to the body with our frames. Here, we put our hand across the chest and a hand in like so, and our elbows are maximally close to our body. So when Sean Williams comes in to tap on me at this position, you'll notice that I'm completely inside his wedges, and we're in a very strong position now to start going through into underhooks and establishing inside position. So the two major forms of frames that we work with in side control bottom are those where we work with our forearms, which are typically placed across the collarbones and here inside the hip. Alternatively, if I cannot get inside position with my left arm, we can place the forearm and bicep here and use this to move our training partners here. But this does confer slightly greater vulnerability as your opponent can now attack this arm. I have to manage this arm position very carefully now. Alternatively, if we have arms inside, that's exactly when we can start going into underhook positions. And from here, we can start going into very effective attacks from the bottom position. When someone gets mounted on us, it's a similar story. From here, we always want to get forearms across and elbows inside. As my opponent comes down to tackle me now in this position, as his legs lock in tight, we're going to have an opportunity now to start that action of bridging up into a shoulder and bringing knees inside and putting someone back in guard position. Okay? So again, it's that same story of forearms framing on our opponent. When he get these forearms in place, when he tries to advance up into a higher mount, there's resistance now. Okay, this is an excellent frame for us to use. Similar things can be done in north-south pins, where as much as possible, we want forearm frames working on a training partner, which enable us to bring knees in and start to go to work and get back into sound defensive positions. But again, that principle is the same. We create forearm frames in close to the body. We never want to be here extended where people can slide between our elbows and get down to chest pins. We always want to minimize our vulnerability by keeping the elbows close to the body, hands in close, in some cases even hands on our own body, the so-called backhand frames, which create very, very strong frames between ourselves and our opponent. So regardless of our opponent's body position, all those frames inside, close to the body. And it's that which is going to enable us to hold an opponent for long periods of time, reduce our vulnerability, and then from there, start moving body weight to get people back into position so we can work effectively from underneath.
Let's look at a critical detail which is involved in the successful application of the single most important escape in all of jiu-jitsu, the elbow escape and its many variations. Okay? I'm going to look at it in the case of mounted position and side position, the two most common areas for its application. This is a detail so important, it should be taught almost every class on escapes, and yet I've never actually seen it taught. This pertains to the positioning and the angle of my lower leg and knee when it's time to elbow escape on a tough opponent. Okay? I'm going to demonstrate it with
Sean Williams out on this side here. Okay. When we go to work in this position, when we go to work in this position, ultimately what we want to do is to join our elbow and knee together, so that it forms an effective frame between myself and my opponent and enables us to control the distance between he and I, okay? So everything is about my knee entering inside my training partner's leg. And if that can happen, we form an effective knee and elbow frame, which usually has a V shape to it, And from here, when my opponent puts body weight on that frame, I can hold his body weight off in such a way that we can now put him back in guard and generate effective motion underneath our training partner. Okay? So, what's involved here? So often, I see people make the task of bringing the leg in so much more difficult than it needs to be through two things: poor knee position and poor angle of the lower leg. Okay? The insertion point for the elbow escape in the case of side position is your opponent's hip. I'll say that again because it's very important. The proper insertion point for your knee is your opponent's hip. So often I see people try to bring the knee along the floor. And as a result, because my opponent has the inside knee position, I'm never going to put him back in guard. You see people use the thigh. Similarly ineffective. I want to find the pocket of the hip. That's the most efficient point for me to begin the process of inserting my knee so that we can create that elbow knee frame. But I need more than just good knee position. I need the correct angle of my lower leg. Notice something. If my foot is lower than my knee, the push of my leg tends to be upwards, and it catches in Sean Williams' hip, and I cannot insert my leg inside my opponent's legs. That all changes the moment I put my foot higher than my knee. This means that my knee can now create a downward angle which easily inserts inside my opponent's legs. The whole key is to go from a situation here where I'm ineffective because of knee position, or here because I'm ineffective because of lower leg angle, and instead get good position, good lower leg angle, so that if I move out even an inch, I can insert my leg. Now, the movements required are very small to put my opponent back in guard, as opposed to down here, where the movements have to be very, very big for me to bring a knee inside. Okay? So to maximize our efficiency, I put my knee in the correct insertion point, the hip. Then I get the correct angle of my lower leg, so that even the smallest shrimping motions have an ability on my part to bring that knee in and create situations when we can physically push people away and start to create effective states which will lead into our attacks. Okay? Now, let's contrast that with the mounted position. In the case of the mounted position, I have a choice in insertion points. If my opponent's foot position is naive and his feet are apart, the usual insertion point is the ankle. However, not many of your opponents are that naive. Most of them do a good job of locking their feet together and then cross-facing you, and then putting an arm out wide for base. Okay? Now, the proper insertion point is going to be behind my opponent's knee. So if the correct insertion point for side control is the hip, in the case of the mounted position, it's usually the knee. So we're going to get our frames in place, get our elbow inside as he locks his feet tight. From here, we're going to start the action of moving his body weight like so. I'm going to take my hand inside his knee. Bring your knees in tight, your feet. Now, from this position, look how I bring my foot higher than my knee, just like we did with side control. If my foot is lower than my knee, I tend to run into the back of his hamstring muscle. Lock tight. And when I go to elbow escape, I find myself fruitlessly trying to bring my leg inside. The minute I turn my foot higher than my knee and point my knee down to the floor, I insert so easily. And as a result, it's very easy for us to put our opponent back in guard. Let's have a look at that again. We've got an opponent in a good mounted position on top of us. He locks in, puts his weight down. We form that effective frame. His feet are locked tight. From here, we start that action of coming in like so. Look how my foot is higher than my knee, and my knee inverts and points down at the floor. Because I have the correct angle and the correct insertion point, it's so easy to get the inside position. Now from here, we complete and put our opponent back in guard. So, just working this solo now, you'll see from a side pin position, we have an imaginary opponent up to our right hand side. We get our frames in order. We put our knee at the correct insertion point, and we get our foot higher than our knee. Our whole thing is to invert the knee, to point the knee down at the floor. It's that which makes the elbow and knee frame so easy to attain. So the key element, we need the right insertion point. Side control, it's typically the hip. Then we need the right angle so we can move inside, and that angle is accentuated by the inversion of the knee so my knee points down at the floor. And as a result, knee and elbow come together very easily. Similarly, with mounted position. Now, the insertion point will be the back of his knee. So we come up, then from here, my foot goes higher than my knee, and I point my knee at the floor. And as a result, hand and knee, instead of elbow and knee, come together very easily, and we put our opponent back in guard. So once again, we have an opponent across our side. Everything in tight, knees in. From here, we start finding the correct insertion point, then the correct angle, and we point our knee downwards, inverting it. And as a result, every movement outwards easily gets our leg to the inside position. So we can complete an elbow escape. Then from the mounted position, from here, we come up, we point the knee inverting downwards, foot is higher than the knee. As a result, we have an easy time moving our opponent back into our guard. Seen in this slide, we can see that these small, seemingly invisible features of a good escape, good insertion point, correct angle of the lower limb, and inverting the knee to point downwards to the mat, will enable you to be far more effective with those critical elbow escapes, the foundation of your escapes in the sport of jiu-jitsu.
Let's have a look at what is unquestionably the single most important tool for escapes in the entire sport of jiu-jitsu. And this is the framing of my knee and elbow together. This can be done in various ways. If my opponent is out to my side and pinning me, the frame of my knee and elbow together is the single most important element which enables me to put someone back in guard from the bottom of a pin. This is an incredibly robust and strong structure. And as my opponent goes to put weight on me, even with a single knee and elbow, you can easily bear the supporting weight. And once this frame is in place, I can move behind the frame. And as a result, dominate the inside position and put my opponent back in guard. So everything we do from bottom positions, whether it be from bottom side control, bottom north-south, or bottom mount, or what have you, is built around the idea of forming this fundamental structure of a V-shaped frame where my lower leg angles downwards and my upper arm angles upwards, and forming a clean V upon which my opponent is stuck. And behind that frame, I'm able to move and put my opponent back in some form of guard. Okay, so the question is always, how are we going to construct that frame? If we have an opponent to cross our side, from here, our intention is always to take one side of the frame, the arm, and put it in first. Then from here, we create the second side of the frame at our opponent's hip. We make sure that our foot is higher than our knee. If my foot is lower than my knee, it's very hard for my knee to penetrate inside my opponent's hip. So we always want to make sure that the foot is higher than the knee. Then we focus on an inverted knee position, which enables me to get knee and elbow together. Once we form that critical V-shaped frame, now we're in a position where we can start to join our feet and push away from our training partner. Now that our bodies are lined up in a straight line, now it's going to be relatively easy for us to put our opponent back in guard and get back on the attack. So always, we're looking to create these V-shaped frames.
regardless of where we are. If my opponent is, say, mounted position, do it in a slightly different way. From here, we start off by putting our arms in place like so, with his feet locked. We want to start off by bridging over one of our shoulders. Then from here, we bring that same V-shaped frame inside our training partner's knee. As he goes to hold position on me now, it's going to be a very difficult thing and relatively easy for us to start moving our opponent over to the other side. As he goes to react, now from here, we're in a good position to come up and into an offensive cycle from bottom. But everything comes down to our ability to join knee and elbow together. The same is going to be true in north-south positions, where as my opponent is on top of me, we place elbows inside, and then from here, we form that same V-shaped frame, which will enable us to turn on our training partner and put our opponent back in some form of guard. But ultimately, everything is going to come down to your ability to join elbow and knee together underneath your opponent and form a temporary frame under which you can move back into a position of guard and back into safety. Now, we're looking at the various methods of escape from pins in Jiu-Jitsu. Let's understand the critical importance of insertion points. Probably the thing that I observe the most as a coach when I go into teach any fundamentals class is that beginning students struggle knowing how to get inside the wedges of their opponent's pins. Okay, so if we have an opponent across our side, like so, you will see people know that they're supposed to put their opponent back in guard. That much they've got down. But when it's time to do so, they try to bring their knees and elbows together at very inefficient points. Usually they go along the floor and the knee runs right into their opponent's knee. Sometimes they bring a knee up here to their opponent's torso and they push the knee into their opponent's body. The correct insertion point, knowing the correct insertion point, makes the action of getting inside your opponent's wedges a lot easier. The correct insertion point for the side escapes is almost always, in the case of the side elbow escape, here at your opponent's hip. Now, a very important thing. I can only exploit that insertion point if I hold my body correctly. If my foot is lower than my knee, you will see it's very difficult for me to insert my knee inside my opponent's hip. That all changes when my foot goes higher than my knee. Because now, as I shrink my body out, my knee can invert, and the inverted knee goes very easily inside the hip. And as a result, we can form a good elbow and knee frame, which will enable us to ultimately put our opponent back in guard quite easily. So once again, we have an opponent here across our side. Look how first I must find the correct insertion point. For the elbow escape from side position, that's right there at the hip. Now, my foot goes higher than my knee. If my foot is lower than my knee, I tend to go up directly into my opponent's body. But when I invert my knee, like so, with my foot higher than my knee, now it's very easy for me to bring my knee to my elbow. And from here, start to create a situation where it's relatively simple for us to put our opponent back in guard. In the case of a mounted position, the correct insertion point will almost always be behind my opponent's knee. In situations like this, look how from here we start with a bridge that takes our opponent's weight out to the side, and then from here my knee goes directly behind my opponent's knee. Because my foot is higher than my knee, okay, if my foot is lower than my knee, I can never get through, okay? But when my foot is higher than my knee, that's what makes it possible to invert my knee and bring it directly through on my training partner. And as a result, it's very easy for us now to finish that elbow escape. You're starting to see some commonalities here. First step in any pin is identify what's the correct insertion point. For the side elbow escape, it's the hip. Then ask yourself a simple question. How can I exploit the insertion point? We do it by bringing our foot higher than our knee. And as a result, for every movement we go outwards, we get to invert our knee and make an easy entrance into our opponent so we can put him back in guard. In the case of the mounted position, the insertion point is behind the knee. When we come up and bridge, my foot goes higher than my knee, and as a result, we can easily go through and into a situation where we put our opponent back in guard. If I fail to work in this manner, and first I don't identify the correct insertion point and I just bring my leg randomly between me and my opponent, you just run right into your opponent. Here, same problem. Even if I do choose the correct insertion point, the hip, if my foot is lower than my knee, I can never get my knee inside my opponent's wedges. It's only the combination of correct insertion point with the inverted knee, my foot higher than my knee, which enables small amounts of movement to bring knee and elbow together and form an effective entry inside your opponent's wedges to put him back in guard. Or, alternatively, from mounted position, with my foot higher than my knee and correctly identifying the insertion point behind the knee, that inverted knee comes in very easily. And as a result, we can quickly put the man back in guard. Later on, we'll see, even in the case of north-south escapes, here the insertion point changes depending upon my opponent's arm position, but it's generally right in front of my training partner's clavicles. If I can get knee and elbow together and my foot higher than my knee, it's very easy under those circumstances to penetrate through and put our opponent back in guard. So once again, we see a good insertion point here is going to be the collarbones or clavicles. And from a situation like this, the knee and elbow come together, my foot is higher than my knee's inverted, pointed down to the floor, and as a result, you can quickly spin, turn, and put an opponent back in guard. Learning to identify the correct insertion point for a given pin, and then working with the inverted knee is going to make it very, very easy for you to put even experienced opponents back in guard out of the bottom of a pin. Now, let's start to look at one of the more interesting and effective escapes from a side pin. This is the spinning escape. It's going to involve an inversion of our body combined with a spin to put our opponent back in guard out of bottom side control. Now, this movement is based around a very specific body movement, often referred to as reverse shrimping. This is a body movement which goes in the exact opposite direction of the most foundational, the most well-known body movement in bottom position, shrimping. So, reverse shrimping. I'll just go solo for a minute. Everyone on their first day in Jiu-Jitsu learns how to shrimp, and we've seen different kinds of shrimping. The most common form is sliding shrimping, where we slide our body out in a given direction. The idea is we plant a foot and we push off the mat. In this fashion, I generate space between me and my opponent, and hopefully we can put him back in guard. Now, that's the conventional form of shrimping that you're all very, very familiar with. So what is reverse shrimping? Well, in a reverse shrimp, we reverse the order of things. I don't plant a foot on the floor and push out. What we do is we turn our legs away from our opponent. We extend our bottom leg and we plant on the floor, not with the heel as we do in conventional shrimping, but rather with the ball of the foot. And I use the ball of the foot not to push, but to pull. Normally in shrimping, we plant the foot and we push. Here, we plant and pull. We pull ourselves to a more or less bottom north-south position so that we can throw our legs, invert, spin, and face our opponent back in guard. So the idea is that my legs move out and away from my opponent. Normally, we're always facing our opponent in a pin. Here we move away, and instead of planting a foot and pushing, we plant a foot and pull. And so you see the action is quite different in a reverse shrimp than a conventional shrimp. Conventionally, we push our hips along the mat. Here, we're learning to pull our hips along the mat. It turns out that this reverse shrimping, based around a pull, is one of the absolute most effective ways to generate space between myself and my opponent. It can also radically change the angle between myself and my opponent. And this will greatly facilitate many of our escapes from bottom side control. So if we have Mateus out to our side, and from here, we start off with our hands in a fairly conventional framing position. I have a reverse crossface, a hand here close to my hips. From this position, we're going to start by turning our hips away from our opponent and planting the ball of our foot right here in the mat. And as a result, we're able to pull our body to a new angle. So I was here, perpendicular to my training partner. I can have my hands like so, or like so. It doesn't really matter. What does matter is that we reach for the floor. And from here, look how we plant our foot and we pull our body in. And as a result, we're able to turn, create a frame, and then scissor our legs around our opponent, spin 180 degrees, and put them back in guard. So you can see this is radically different from conventional elbow escapes based around shrimping. A conventional elbow escape is based around the idea of an insertion point and forming a frame by shrimping, inverting my knee, and facing my opponent at all times. Here, we go in a very different direction. We reach for the floor and we pull. And as a result, we can form a frame, knee and elbow, spin underneath our training partner's body, and once again, find ourselves back in the safety of guard position. So once again, we have an opponent across our side. Instead of conventional elbow escapes, where we plant our foot, generate space between ourselves and our opponent, instead, we're going to take our legs and reach for the floor. Once we reach for the floor, we pull our body. We form a frame, bring knee and elbow together, we form a scissor, and from this position, we're back in guard. Essentially what you're doing is you're converting a bottom side control situation into a bottom north-south situation. Because your opponent finds it difficult to react in time to the sudden change in angle, they often shift and move their body. And that will give you an opportunity to form frames between your upper body and their upper body and insert your knees at the collarbones. Then a simple spin underneath our training partner creates a nice means of putting our opponent back in guard and getting my center line lined up with his. The key element is always going to be your ability to hit this reverse shrimp. So we have an imaginary opponent out to our side. Instead of shrimping away from him, we move our body like so and pull our body away from him. With that change in angle, we get frames inside and we throw our body over the top. Because I don't have an opponent, I'm going to use the floor as a substitute to turn 180 degrees and put him back in guard. So one more time. We have an opponent perpendicular to us, holding us down in a side pin. Even as he comes in tight with his arms, hands locked up here, we want to make sure that we get our body moving out and away from him. So our knees point away, we plant on the floor, and we bring everything inside. Once we form that frame, we turn our body 180 degrees underneath our training partner, and we're back in business. This forms an amazing complement to your conventional side elbow escapes. They work very well as a kind of 1-2 punch. You typically work with a conventional elbow escape, shrimping away from your opponent. You feel the resistance is strong. We go completely the other way, hit a reverse shrimp, and then spin from bottom north-south and put our opponent back in guard. It's very, very difficult for your opponent to stop the two working in unison. They can block one at a time, but blocking both in unison is very difficult indeed.
Now, we're starting to look at some of the less commonly seen but still highly effective escapes out of side pins. One of the most effective escapes comes from the use of propping to get our shoulders off the mat and put us into a seated position where we can easily scoot and put our opponent back in guard. First, let's look at propping. Okay, propping refers to any situation where I come up on an elbow, like so, or a hand, like so. So my upper body is propped up on hand or elbow. These props generate a surprising amount of strength. The strongest of the props is the elbow prop, where you're propped here on your elbow like so. And a hand prop is not quite as strong because your arm's more extended, but it does have the advantage of creating more height between your head and your opponent's head. So one gives the advantage of height and one gives the advantage of robustness or strength. These are interesting escapes because they take you in the opposite direction that most side escapes work with. Typically, if I have an opponent out to my right-hand side, most of our escapes involve turning into our opponent to put him back in guard, or turning into our opponent in order to come up to our knees. What's interesting about propping escapes is we have an opponent out to our right-hand side, they involve the idea of coming up, like so, facing the same direction as our opponent is facing. And as a result, we're essentially moving away from our opponent. This may seem risky because it seems that you're exposing your back to your opponent. But don't worry, if it's done well, there will be very little back exposure indeed. So, we're going to start off with a situation where we're able to get our hand inside our opponent's arm, here, the crossface. How is that possible? Okay, I'll just change the angle so we can see how this occurs. When Mateus has a crossface here in place, the natural question is, how can I get my hand inside the crossface? It's not easy because that crossface is very, very close. There's not a lot of space involved there. So what we're going to do is we're going to start with a good, strong bridge that forces my opponent to base this hand out on the floor. So we're going to start by bridging onto a single shoulder and moving our opponent's head across our body, just like so. And as a result, I can get my hand inside my training partner's crossface. Once we get the hand inside, we can do a trick with the second hand. We're going to start posting our hands inside our training partner's biceps, like so, with thumb posts. As he tries to go back to his crossface, it's notoriously difficult now. Now I take my hips up off the floor, and in one motion, we're going to take our left leg and extend it outwards. So I have my buttocks off the mat, left leg turns outwards, and then from here in one motion, we now get an opportunity to start coming up across our training partner's body to our hand. And now it's relatively easy to draw our feet to our buttocks, scoot, and we're back in the safety of guard. Okay, so let's have a look at this whole sequence again. Okay, I want to get my hand inside, but I currently can't do that because my opponent has a tight crossface and there's not sufficient room to get my hand inside. So we're going to start off by putting our bicep on our training partner's head, a bicep crossface, and from here I'm going to come up into a strong bridge that creates space between his shoulder and my neck and head. And as a result, my hand goes in. Once the hand goes in, we're going to bring the second hand across and the first hand down. So we have a good grip here. As he tries to reach for my head, it's hard for him to be effective. Okay? Now, my hips come up and everything goes across my body. Don't push up, but rather push across. So everything goes across the center line. Now you're propped up in a position where you can easily recompose your guard and face your center line with your opponents. Let's begin. My opponent is in a good position, pinning me down across side. We're going to start off by taking his head and moving it like so that my body faces downwards. Now, my hand goes inside. As he tries to get a hold of me, it's difficult. Now we insert again from this position. As he looks to put weight down on me and hold me down, our whole focus is to get everything across the body. Don't push up, push across. So that means I have to turn my body out. And as a result, we get that man moving. Now from here, our center lines are back in operation. and we're ready to start the play from bottom position. One more time.
Can I demonstrate from a different angle? From here. I want to get my hand inside the cross face, but it's not easy from here. It's not a lot of space to work with. Okay? Look how I take everything in a big bridge in this direction so that my hand goes inside. Now, as my opponent comes back, I take my left hand, thumb post in, right hand thumb post in. Now from this position, it's all across the chest. And as a result, we can align with our opponent and put him back in guard. This is a very, very useful way to use a propping action to get out from bottom side control. Now I'm sure you could guess by looking at that general movement why it's a relatively safe movement to use, even though you are turning away from your opponent. It's all based on the idea, if you're on two knees, of control of your opponent's elbow and arm. As long as I'm outside Mateus's arm, my back can be exposed to him and it's just fine. Okay? So if I'm here and I turned away from my opponent, this would be suicide because I've physically turned my back on my opponent in a way where he can easily go up and control my head. And that's terrible. However, if I have my body positioned outside of my training partner's arm, there's no way for Mateus to control my head. He can even walk around all the way behind me. His legs are completely behind me, but he has no mechanism to control my head. And as a result, he can't exploit his leg position. But we, on the other hand, can easily scoot and put this guy back in guard. So the whole escape is predicated on this idea of staying outside of our opponent's arms. I'll just demonstrate from another angle. With Mateus in here, I want to get my right hand inside. That's what I want. But how am I going to do that on a strong opponent who's got a good crossface? I'm going to do it with a strong turn in. We shift our hips and we start a bridging action that moves his head from one side of my body across to the other. That means I have to bridge up onto a single shoulder and turn my chest down towards the floor. Because my chest is down to the floor, it's easy for me to get my hand inside. Now as he tries to grip me, look how I thumb post right there. Then I double thumb post here. When he tries to get my head, it's so difficult. It's actually a pretty decent frame. Now from this position, look how my hips are off the floor. I take everything out in that direction, propping up on my elbow or my hand. And as a result, we now align easily with our training partner once again. Okay, I'll just demonstrate solo. Where this goes wrong for most people is when they try to get the hand inside the crossface, they bridge up, but their chest is still facing the ceiling. Mateus. If I do this, I'll never get my hand inside. If I just bridge up with my chest facing the ceiling, I can never fit my hand in. The whole idea is to create a bridge where I ultimately face chest down. When I'm chest down, that's when my hand goes in. Once I get the first hand in, we can easily get the second thumb in. Once the first thumb goes in, we can easily get the second one in. Yeah? And then everything, as he goes to put weight on me, chest down on my chest down, chest down. From here, our whole thing is to get our legs moving in this direction. And it's that which creates a forcible movement on the part of our opponent across our center line and makes it easy to get up and put them back in guard.